Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday. Woo! It's Friday. Yes, Friday, September 6th. September 6th. Woo! International mow the lawn outside the guy doing the podcast's window day, apparently. But I think everything has ceased for now. We'll see whether it kicks up again in just a few minutes. Had the windows open to air things out just a little bit here in the pleasant, cool morning weather. No tropical storm evidence here in our part of Virginia today, and that's good news. The storm does live, however, down south of our way, and the Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads area getting the brunt of it for Virginia so far today. The storm, as I understand it, is parked over the Outer Banks of North Carolina and wrecking everybody's vacation homes. So we'll keep an eye on things there, perhaps. That I will probably be closed, though, as it's a sleepy Friday. So had the windows open to try and take advantage of the nice cool weather, but the lawnmowers started up, and it just started up, and they're burning oil, so it was really fantastic smell that's now lingering here at KITM World Headquarters. That won't stop us from rounding up the news, however, and I can always take a Sharpie and make believe it smells like something entirely different. Yes, we're still mired in Sharpie Gate. The president is still, I don't know whether he's done anything yet this morning, but as of last night, still actively engaged in trying to convince everyone that Alabama was at terrible risk from Hurricane Dorian. This, despite the fact that perhaps his attention ought to be elsewhere, like in parts of the United States that are actually suffering damage from the storm right now. But yeah, it's actually kind of become a major story just because he refuses to let it go, and lots of speculation about why he won't let it go. Is it simply that he's an egomaniac and he can't admit being wrong? I think that's part of it. I think there's possibly more to it, but I guess last night he kept things alive by, I guess he saw out the window the Fox News reporter doing his nightly stand-up from in front of the White House. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's not stand-up comedy, although, well, I don't know. I suppose it depends on the contents of the report. But doing his nightly routine where he stands out there and they put the White House in the background so that it looks like official news and everything, and reads to everyone, I don't know whether he does cue cards or whatever, about how wonderful everything is and how great the president is and how big his hands are or whatever it is. And I guess the president summoned him inside because I guess he saw a friendly reporter there, and summoned him inside to one more time try and convince a reporter that that he had been right and that Alabama was, in fact, at risk. I've got a Washington Post piece on it here, but I guess it occurs to me now I ought to check in with Bill in Portland, Maine, where they are also not experiencing the hurricane, although it will come their way eventually, just to find out if I'm on the right track for today's show. You always get good advice about how to begin the show this way. Daily Co's Radio, now being live, we'll modify his message for your convenience. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, will be using week-old weather maps to brief you on the storm every hour while you're golfing. Hit them straight. Hit them straight. If it's Donald Trump, hit them straight where it counts. That's what I like to say. Anyway, no word on how early the president will be taking off for golf or where he will be playing this weekend or whether he's too embarrassed. I don't think that's possible to actually go ahead and play again this weekend. I think that's at the heart of what the problem is with him and the Alabama thing. Let me grab the Washington Post article just to get things started. Who's writing this here? Toulouse, is that her name? Toulouse Olorunipa. Oh my goodness, I'm not sure where you're going to put the emphasis on that one. That's a new one for us. Josh Dawsey is not new for us, and so therefore, no opportunity to screw his name up. But sorry to the top byliner on this one, Toulouse Olorunipa. My goodness. The Runipa seems easy enough. Olorunipa. That's my best guess. No idea. But I apologize once again to everybody and forever on the show. Just blanket apology for all time. He posted 9 tweets and 5 maps about Alabama. How do we say this? I don't know. Screwing this thing up. Posted 9 tweets and 5 maps about Alabama and the big storm. That would be Donald Trump that we're talking about. He defended a doctored hurricane map. That's indefensible, by the way. Defended a doctored hurricane map that had been altered with a black Sharpie to include the state. And he had his White House release a 225-word statement defending his erroneous warnings that Alabama was, quote, going to get a piece of the storm. Yes, they trotted out a rear admiral who, I don't know, I guess I'm not certain where they're attached to, but trotted out this statement from the rear admiral swearing that, oh, yeah, we definitely showed him something that at one point had Alabama in it. As Hurricane Dorian battered the Carolinas with torrential rain and wind Thursday, President Trump remained fixated on sunny Alabama, a state he falsely claimed was in the storm's crosshairs long after it was in the clear. For a 4th straight day, Trump's White House sought to clean up the president's mistaken warnings to Alabama from Sunday, seeking to defend Trump's tweets by releasing statements, disseminating alternative hurricane maps, and attacking the media. And that little paragraph should include disseminating altered hurricane maps, not alternative, but okay. And there were some alternative maps, but you might as well include the fact that you actually physically altered this one. Trump also took to Twitter again to defend his use of a doctored and outdated hurricane map that looped in Alabama using black marker, the latest iteration in a days-long administration-wide campaign on the topic. That's the most important part, really. In effect, Trump was attempting to bend time, claiming that a projection that was several days out of date was accurate at the time he warned Alabama of a dire threat that didn't exist. This is at the heart of the problem here. Just as I said, Alabama was originally projected to be hit, Trump tweeted Thursday, highlighting week-old maps that showed a low probability of tropical storm winds in a small corner of Alabama. The fake news denies it. Trump's fixation on his erroneous Dorian warnings underscores a long history of defending inaccurate claims, from the crowd size at his inaugural address to false claims of voter fraud in 2016 to fictional, quote, unknown Middle Easterners streaming across the southern border in migrant caravans. Has anybody seen even one, by the way? Whatever happened to all those prayer rugs we found in the desert, which turned out to be soccer jerseys? Tim O'Brien, a Trump biographer and executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion, said the Alabama claims underscore the president's belief that admitting error is a sign of weakness. He's doubling down on the worst sides of his troubled personality, to never admit an error and to continue obsessing about it and emphasizing it when it doesn't serve him well to do so, he said. He doesn't move along because he is incapable of moving along. That sounds true, doesn't it? Trump, who canceled a trip to Poland to monitor the storm, was especially sensitive to the criticism he has received for misrepresenting the hurricane's path, according to current and former officials. Always good to be prepared. Oh, this is Trump here. Always good to be prepared. But the fake news is only interested in demeaning and belittling, Trump tweeted Monday, complaining about an ABC News report that highlighted the discrepancy between Trump's warnings to Alabama and the government's assurance that the state was not under threat. What I said was accurate. All fake news in order to demean, Trump tweeted yesterday, adding, I accept the fake news apologies, of which he has gotten none, of course. So another delusion, another hallucination for Trump. No one's even counting that one. Trump, who has privately and publicly griped about media coverage during the Group of Seven summit last month, complained extensively to administration officials this week about coverage of the Alabama issue and asked aides to bring him old briefings showing Alabama in the storm's potential path. Even as the Category 2 hurricane knocked out power and damaged property in the Carolinas on Thursday, Trump was highlighting old maps in an attempt to prove that his original claims about Alabama were accurate. The White House also released a lengthy statement from Trump's Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor. There we are. There's our Rear Admiral. Rear Admiral Peter Brown, that sought to defend Trump's statements and use of days-old maps. And I guess some quote from the statement here. While speaking to the press on Sunday, September 1st, all right, the president addressed Hurricane Dorian and its potential impact on multiple states, including Alabama, Brown wrote. The president's comments were based on that morning's Hurricane Dorian briefing, which included the possibility of tropical storm force winds in southeastern Alabama. It was Trump who used a black Sharpie. Got that? Again, it was Trump who used a black Sharpie, imagine that, to mark up an official National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration map, which he displayed during an Oval Office briefing on Wednesday, according to a White House official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss internal deliberations. No one else writes like that on a map with a black Sharpie, the official said of the map, which added Alabama into the hurricane's potential pathway inside the loop of the marker, which, again, is not even what the Admiral was talking about. The Admiral is making the claim that on Sunday morning they had showed him a briefing which indicated that there might be tropical storm force winds in a small corner of Alabama. Not that the hurricane was headed that way. The cone, that projection, which Trump altered with the magic marker, is where the eye of the storm is expected to go. And somewhere within this cone. That's why it kind of spreads out as it goes along. It's narrow at the end of it where the hurricane currently is because they know where it's going to go. It only widens at the end because that's the probability. Where will the actual eye wall go? There were no projections on Sunday showing the eye wall of the hurricane anywhere near Alabama. At best, Trump saw projections about the cone of where the eye wall was supposed to go and saw other maps that showed other ancillary effects of the hurricane, i.e. tropical storm force winds hundreds of miles away from the eye wall. May have included, we're not even sure, on Sunday morning, tropical storm force winds in this tiny corner of Alabama. So anyways, we have that pretty clear. Several White House officials argued that media coverage of the Alabama issue has been unfair to Trump, but one senior administration official said that as long as it's in the news, he is not going to drop it. Trump has recently fixated on minor points of grievance that aides and Republican lawmakers would prefer he avoid, such as former aide Anthony Scaramucci, actress Deborah Messing, and an Axios story that said he proposed bombing hurricanes to stop their progress. He is the one that put idiotic hurricane coverage in the news. On Sunday, after a weekend spent at Camp David with afternoons at his Virginia golf course, this is where we're getting to the heart of things, Trump warned multiple times that Alabama was likely to be hit. But the storm had already turned northward at that point, and models from the National Hurricane Center did not show Alabama at any significant risk. 20 minutes after Trump tweeted Sunday that Alabama was among states that would most likely be hit much harder than anticipated, the National Weather Service in Birmingham, Alabama, tweeted bluntly that that was not the case. Alabama will not see any impacts from Dorian. We repeat, no impacts from Hurricane Dorian will be felt across Alabama, it said. The system will remain too far east. Just a few minutes later, the president spoke to reporters and again claimed that Alabama was, quote, going to get a piece of it. Brown, who joined the White House National Security Council from the Coast Guard, has been assigned to give weekend updates to Trump on the storm. So it's your fault, Admiral. We spent 2 days at Camp David going over a lot of different things having to do with the hurricane, Trump said of Brown. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have realized from the construction of the sentence that it was Trump. A lot of things. We spent 2 days at Camp David going over a lot of different things having to do with the hurricane. He didn't. And that's how you know. Also, Trump said it. The Admiral has informed me through all of the different sources that he has. But you can pretty much get it on television, Admiral. This is now a Category 5. And there's another spilling of the beans. You can pretty much get it on television. That's where you got it. An NSC spokesman did not respond to questions about whether Brown had briefed the president about updated forecasts over the weekend that showed Alabama in the clear. Another piece of my puzzle. I haven't even read this yet, but I have a theory about what happened, and this article seems to bear it out. And I'm bursting to give it to you, but I gave it to you last night on Twitter, so it might be a repeat for some of you. Let me finish the article. Trump has fixated I did this one already. Deborah Messing, etc. All right, I was just scrolling to see how much more there was in this piece. Brown said in his statement that he had briefed Trump, but let's see, on Sunday morning, using forecasts from the National Hurricane Center that showed the remote possibility of tropical storm winds, right? We got that one. Okay. Oh, this was pretty funny. During a briefing at FEMA headquarters on Sunday afternoon, Trump acknowledged governors who had dialed in from Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. He then turned to a state that wasn't represented on the line. This is, I guess, where he just continues with this nonsense. Oh, did I skip a little bit here? I did. I guess I was. It sounded like a repeat of something I'd said, where Admiral Brown said that he had briefed him on Sunday morning using forecasts from the National Hurricane Center that showed a remote possibility of tropical storm winds in the southeast corner of Alabama. And that is to say, a different kind of map, not the cone map. He said he also briefed Trump using other meteorological models. These products showed possible storm impacts well outside the forecast zone, he wrote, the original official forecast zone. During a briefing on Sunday, so he has all the governors on the line. And by the way, when he tweeted about it, he left out the governor of North Carolina, who is apparently a Democrat, and that's what caused him to decide not to include him, talking about how well prepared all the governors were, so long as they were Republicans. Democratic governors, of course, he does not list as having been prepared, though they were on the phone. But it says here in the article, he then turned to a state that wasn't represented on the line. It may get a little piece of a great place. It's called Alabama. Again, the toddler sentence of this. A great place. It's called Alabama. Yeah, it's one of the 50 states. It's frequently listed first when we're talking about states in alphabetical order. Everybody knows about Alabama. It's called Alabama. This is like this obscure place. And Alabama could even be in for at least some very strong winds, and something more than that it could be. This just came up, unfortunately. It's the size of the storm that we're talking about. So for Alabama, just please be careful also. So that's erroneous, obviously. Also, by the way, how do you like that little excuse? It just came up. The whole crux of the issue here is that it was on the old forecasts. So it just came up is obviously nonsense too. It came up days ago. It's gone now. The new map doesn't have it coming up at all. It just came up is another lie on top of all of this. Maps tweeted out by Trump on yesterday, showed, or is this, I can't even tell. Are they talking about the previous Thursday? Because that's when it originally happened. Yes, maybe that's it. Maps tweeted out by Trump on Thursday showed I guess since this article was published yesterday, they would have said today if it was yesterday. So last Thursday, showed part of southeastern Alabama with a 5 to 20% chance of tropical storm force winds. A week-old forecast that was long out of date by the time the president tweeted out his warnings to the state Sunday. Got it. Trump claimed Wednesday that Alabama had faced, that would have been 2 days ago, Wednesday, that Alabama had faced a 95% chance of a direct hit, a claim not borne out by meteorological models or reality or, by people with eyeballs. I mean, that's just crazy. He's wildly overreaching to try to justify himself, and he hasn't studied the material. That's what's really bothering me about this whole thing. Some Democrats criticize Trump for focusing on the wrong thing during a natural disaster. Pete Buttigieg said he felt sorry for the president. That's interesting. I don't know if he felt it necessary to pull out a Sharpie and change the map. I know he did. I don't know if one of his aides felt they had to do that to protect his ego. They might have felt that, but they didn't do it. No matter how you cut it, this is an unbelievably sad state of affairs for our country. That seems true. I don't really know why we have to have Pete Buttigieg say that, but that's the reality of it. Okay, so here's the theory. In case you didn't get a chance to see it spelled out for you on Twitter last night. But here's what I think is going on here. Yes, it's about Trump's ego. Yes, he doesn't want to admit he's wrong. Yes, he's pulling from all over the place and confusing maps, no doubt about that. And using old maps. Yes, it's the use of old maps that I think are at the crux of this thing. What it means, in my view, my opinion, my theory of this is, Trump, of course, cancels a diplomatic visit to Poland. I don't know if he was scheduled to go in any other places like Pence did. Pence did this grand European tour here. He was supposed to go to Poland, and it's probably wise not to lose track of why he was supposed to go to Poland. He was supposed to go to Poland to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the invasion of Poland, I guess the joint invasion of Poland by the Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. They divided Poland between them. But the 80th anniversary of that event, which, of course, would have been a traumatic event. I mean, eventually Poland comes out as an independent state again at the other end of, well, semi-independent, I guess, under the thumb of the Soviet Union, on the other end of World War II. But he doesn't attend the event. It's a big memorial World War II event. And honestly, no other president would have escaped the criticism of blowing off the 80th commemoration, 80th anniversary commemoration of a major World War II event like this. But he sends Pence instead because I've got to monitor the hurricane. He's going into the weekend. He is clearly convinced that the presidential thing to do is to be seen staying home and keeping an eye on the storm. So he announces that is going to happen. Also, who cares about Poland? I don't want to go. I don't like flying. I want to sleep in my own bed. I don't watch telly. That is all driving this. I'll send Pence. Who cares about Poland? Even though they're becoming right-wing authoritarian and everything, and I love them for it, I'm not going to go. So he sends Pence and tries to look presidential. But even as he's saying it, he knows full well, I don't want to sit in the White House and get briefed on this stupid storm this whole time. I want to play golf. I'm the president. I can order people to brief me on the golf course if I need to know something. So instead, he F's off to Camp David. And he chooses Camp David, I'm sure, because that's a place where people are used to hearing in the news that the president is being briefed, that there's a situation room and communications equipment at Camp David. There isn't. I don't know whether there is or isn't, how I think about it, at Sterling, the Virginia golf course, or at the Bedminster golf course. There may be. I'm sure there's some emergency equipment stored there because of how often he's there. He's there more often than, any of the other official facilities. But people aren't used to hearing in the news that there are situation rooms at these golf resorts, and they would probably resent hearing that they've built situation rooms at these golf resorts. So off he goes to Camp David, which he hates, and immediately he goes there, goes to sleep, and then in the morning, zoom, in the helicopter again, more than halfway, back to the Virginia golf course to play golf. But the White House puts out the story that he's being, quote, briefed hourly on the storm situation. Later, of course, mass shooting erupts, and he's going to be briefed hourly on that too. But he's playing golf the whole time. But don't worry about it, he's being briefed hourly. What has happened here is, in an effort to not be blamed for blowing off a major weather event, he flips the bird to Poland, says, screw you, screw World War II. I'm going to stay here and monitor the hurricane. They put out the story that he's being briefed hourly. And then, of course, he's not briefed hourly. I'm sure somebody shows up. Maybe they think he's supposed to be briefed hourly. And he's like, get the hell out of here. I'm playing golf. Shut up. Leave me alone. I don't care about the hurricane. I'll watch TV if I want to know about the hurricane. So what happens is he's attempting to look like he's up on things, but he hasn't done any of the homework. He's been shirking his duty, and that's the fear. He doesn't want people to know that he's a big shirker, because that was everything he ever accused Obama of being. He goes golfing and shirks his duty. So what happens is, this is what we know about Trump. We know this pretty well, right? What Trump thinks, and I put that in scare quotes, is whatever the last person to speak to him told him to think. Now, how does somebody who's getting briefed hourly on the actual track of the storm come out and speak off the cuff, working off of 4-day-old data? And the answer is, there weren't any hourly briefings. There weren't any briefings at all. And if there were, he wasn't paying any attention to them. He was watching television. And the last time he watched television, it looked like maybe Alabama might be in the path of the storm, because the last thing he watched was television on Thursday, because by Friday he was packing to go to Camp David and get ready to play golf. That's what happened here. The only information in his head was the last that was introduced to his head from television on Thursday, and he had done none of the homework up until that point, and so he was still working off of the old information, and he doesn't want anyone to know it. That's the problem. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Frog in the throat even in the introduction here. I gotta find a solution to this. So I thought I had hit upon a solution, which, one, it's not working, but two, it's also not terribly professional. It helps a little bit. But, you know, what I need is some sort of like astringent material, before going on the air. And I found that the skin of some good fresh grapes, like eating some grapes ahead of time, helped kind of clear things up a little bit. And, I'm out of grapes. But, you know, what's made of grapes is wine is made of grapes. And I thought, oh, well, what if I just poured a little bit of that and, swirled that around a little bit and help sort of clear things up. And it sounded like a great idea because wine, and it sounded like really fun and radical because it's 9 a.m. too. Like, yeah, what we should do is drink wine and do the show. Not enough to affect the show, although who knows, maybe it's affecting the show. But it's just not, that doesn't do the trick either. In addition to which, it doesn't go well with toothpaste. I found that out pretty quickly too. So, these are things you usually don't learn because, wine's a bit of a PM drink, at least in my book, but, whatever. Okay. So we thought we'd, throw a curveball in there and, it's not working out that well. Oh, look, here's a picture from, Ocracoke Island at the moment, rapidly rising water apparently on the island there, and, coming from the National Weather Service, and flashing across Twitter. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody there, but Ocracoke Island, a favorite stop of mine along the Outer Banks of North Carolina. At least it looks like it's coming up in a bad angle. Quite honestly, the storm is taking a weird track. Not terrible, like for super destructive angle. I've seen when it comes straight across the Outer Banks, it sometimes will break through the island and cut a new channel, a new inlet through the barrier islands, if it's really a vicious storm. But this one seems to be moving sort of along the coast, and so like the eye wall is going to go straight up over the length of Hatteras Island. So there's going to be a lot of wind damage, I would guess, from that. And we'll see, we'll see what happens, as the president would have it. Anyway, as I was saying before the break, we got to sort of the exciting conclusion of my theory, which I spelled out last night, which was that what he's really covering for, what Trump is really covering for here is the fact that he stopped doing his homework. He flips the bird to Poland and says, I'm staying home to monitor the hurricane, and then, of course, gives in to temptation and refuses to stay abreast of matters related to the hurricane. Even though the word is abreast, and he would ordinarily really enjoy that, he has refused because golf is more important to him. So what I think happened was that he stopped listening to news about the hurricane when he went on his little mini golf vacation. And the fact that he got caught unprepared on Sunday talking about things that he had last heard on Thursday made it plain to him that he was going to get caught, that he was going to be called out for not being prepared, for having screwed Poland. Not that anybody cares about Poland in among his base, but having screwed that, having told everybody I'm not going to do my work, and, you know, with respect to Poland, because I'm going to do this other work, and he didn't do that work, and he didn't want people to find out about it, and he blurted out stuff that made it obvious that no, he hadn't been being briefed hourly, he hadn't been briefed at all, and he just didn't want to get caught this way. So I think that's what this is really all about. There's really just no way that you could have been briefing somebody like Trump, who regurgitates the last thing he was told all the time. There's no way you could have been briefing him every hour, and still the only thing he can recall is something from 4 days ago. He doesn't have that kind of brain. It wouldn't work. If you say anything to him about the hurricane in between telling him on Thursday that Alabama could get hit and speaking to him on Sunday morning about what's actually happening, you'll blow the whole plan apart. There's no chance that he would give out erroneous information like that. So I think that's what this is at the heart of it. Surely he doesn't want to admit mistake, but what he really doesn't want to admit is that he made a mistake that revealed him as having blown off his official duties, which is everything he always said Obama did, and he's obviously better than Obama or anybody else for that matter, and that's what's really bothering him. I think that's it. But kudos to the reporters who are able to get a comment out of somebody at the White House saying, yeah, by the way, with respect to who drew on the map with the Sharpie, the answer is Trump. Because Trump was asked directly about how that Sharpie marking got on the map, and he gave the I don't know thing. Which, as Digby pointed out, he did, in her opinion, with the same face and attitude and words that he denied having any knowledge of the Stormy Daniels payment, and that's all fallen apart since. And by the way, it's back in the news, and as I said, I think on Tuesday, perhaps, we got word that the House Democrats would be looking into that again and opening that subject up. And of course now it's just known as it is known, Khaleesi, as conventional wisdom that he had direct conversations with Michael Cohen, who's now sitting in jail for this, about those payoffs, and knew everything that there was to know about it, but decided to deny it point blank to the press anyway, even though nobody believed him at the time. Now we are in the same situation with the stupid hurricane. All right, on to other subjects. Let's see. Important things, less important things. I have a mix. Here's a piece of news that I missed reporting to you the other day, though it did make it onto my radar, and I had put it away in Pocket. I'll go back to the original report. It's somewhere back here. I have to scroll a ways, I think, to get it. Maybe I didn't put the piece that I thought I put in there. But Republican troll operative Jacob Wohl is in the news again. This is the guy who every once in a while comes up with a stupid scam and calls a press conference and says, he was the one, for instance, who, where is this information? I was pretty sure I had it from the Daily Beast, and now I don't see it around. Maybe it's in my Twitter stream from days ago. But he was the one who called the press conference saying, I have a person who has been sexually assaulted by Robert Mueller. Do you remember this story? And I don't know, he tried with the sexual assault thing was a theme with him, and he tried selling that about a couple of people, as I recall. But anyway, minor hoaxster in general. He's not really a big player in it, but everything he says is a lie, and so I guess that's where I went with the direction of major hoaxster. But he's also the guy who was all of 12 years old or whatever when he was banned for life from securities trading of some kind because of having been involved in a scam, in a financial scam, before he became a political scammer. But where was that? There was news over the weekend, and I thought it was the Daily Beast that had it, was that Jacob Wohl was now the subject of a federal arrest warrant. And I'll see if I can find the story I was thinking of. Yeah, there's the Daily Beast. Jacob, I guess this is the updated version of it. But the 2 days ago was Jacob Wohl charged with felony in California, I think was, and that there's an arrest warrant out for him. And it's now developed to where he's been charged with a felony in California, and I guess ancillary to this, apparently it had to do with financial crimes again. Let me go to the New York Times piece that I have currently in front of me. Jacob Wohl charged with a felony in California. Mr. Wohl, 21, he's all of 21 here, a conservative operative who has promoted politically motivated conspiracy theories, was charged with selling an unregistered security. Now, again, he's been banned from some portion of the securities industry for life before, and now at 21, he's involved in his second infraction in this, on the side from his political hoaxes. Christine Hauser is the person who really knows what's going on here, more than I do anyway. In this article from yesterday's New York Times, Jacob Wohl, a conservative operative with a large internet following, who has helped orchestrate efforts to smear opponents of President Trump, was charged this week with a felony in California related to the sale of a security, according to court documents. Mr. Wohl, a former blogger who has contributed to The Gateway Pundit, a right-wing news site, made headlines in recent months for his apparent involvement in efforts to promote false sexual assault allegations against Robert S. Mueller III, the former special counsel, and Pete Buttigieg, that's the other one, the Democratic presidential candidate. Mr. Wohl, whose residence is listed as in Corona, appeared on Wednesday in Superior Court of California on a charge of selling an unregistered security in 2016, the complaint shows. A court spokeswoman said in an email on Thursday that he would be arraigned on October 24th, just before Halloween, which is a big deal for him. He's still a young guy. Might be a problem for his trick-or-treating. David Wohl, Jacob Wohl's father, who is about 14, I guess, who was listed on court records as his lawyer, by the way, said on Twitter on Wednesday that his son had been released on his own recognizance. Huge mistake. We expect a complete and total exoneration, he wrote. Matthew Johnson, a business partner of Mr. Wohl's, was charged with the same crime under the name of a company called Montgomery Assets, according to arrest warrants dated August 19th. I don't know if they're talking about Montgomery, Alabama, but poor Alabama gets involved in everything here. It was not immediately clear who was representing Mr. Johnson, who had not made a court appearance, a district attorney's office spokesman, John Hall, said on Thursday. The Daily Beast first reported on Wednesday on the warrants. There's that story, so I can give you that too. The charges against Mr. Wohl and Mr. Johnson stem from June 2016, when investigators with the Riverside County District Attorney's Office received a complaint from a man in Arizona who said he had invested $75,000 through their company, Wohl Capital Investment Group, according to the arrest warrants. Imagine, this guy's 21 now, and it's 2019. So presumably he's 3 years younger than that then. 21, 20, 19, 18 years old. Oh, hi, sir. I represent Wohl, what did he call it? Wohl Capital Investment Group. I'm Jacob Wohl of the Wohl Capital Investment Group. Boy, you look like you're 4. How old are you? I'm 18. Maybe it was all on the phone. Who knows? Well, here's $75,000 because you're obviously a qualified investment counselor at 18 years of age. Although, who knows, maybe he said his father was the name partner here. And he was just, helping out. I got no idea. The man told investigators that the money had been lost. By the way, this is what makes it a story now. He later killed himself, the warrants said. Yes, the man invested $75,000 with this infant. The guy stole it, Wohl did, and it's gone. And this investor commits suicide. Jacob Wohl killed this guy. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the story is, he was suffering from terminal illness, etc. And this was disposable income to him. Who knows? But this doesn't sound good, does it? Republican squad, ladies and gentlemen. That's what these kids do. They steal money and they get people to kill themselves. Republicanism. That's it. He doesn't care, right? Let the buyer beware. The man told investigators the money had been lost. He later killed himself, the warrants said. Maybe that's why the warrants were issued. In July, the two men had a new company called Montgomery Assets that purported to be an asset management firm, the warrants said. An investigator with the district attorney's office posing as a real estate agent contacted the company saying he had a client interested in investing. That led to meetings and conversations among the investigator, an undercover detective, and two partners. A promissory note was given to the undercover detective, who was instructed to wire $100,000 and receive a 17% rate of return as part of investments in purchasing and flipping residential properties. This appeared to be an offer to sell a security, the warrants said, but it added that no registration or exemptions for the security under the state corporation code were found. There are very strict rules about selling securities in general, even to supposedly sophisticated investors, and he was following none of them. It's a highly regulated industry for a reason. In November of 2018, Mr. Wohl and Jack Berkman, a Republican lawyer known for peddling right-wing conspiracy theories, held a news conference where they claimed without evidence that a woman had made sexual assault accusations against Mr. Mueller. I think we all remember that one. At the time, Mr. Mueller was investigating, Trump. I mean, do we really have to spend time explaining that? Mr. Wohl and Mr. Berkman's appearance came days after Mr. Mueller asked the FBI to investigate suspicious emails offering money to women in exchange for fabricating sexual misconduct claims against him. Seems like a bad thing to write down. Mr. Wohl said in an interview last year that one of the women had been a client of his firm, Surefire Intelligence. You remember that one? I remember reading about the Surefire Intelligence situation, and that too, I think, covered by the Daily Beast. That was a scam, something he put together, totally fake website. The phone number was registered to like his mother or something, and half of the profile pictures that he had put up as purporting to be employees of Surefire Intelligence were in fact like Hollywood actor headshots, and he didn't realize it or whatever. It totally fell apart. Mr. Wohl later wrote on Twitter that the news media was trying to smear him. It wasn't much of a try. They were just reporting the news. His account on the social media site has since been suspended. Mr. Wohl and Mr. Berkman were also involved in the promotion of a false sexual assault allegation against Mr. Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, in case you didn't know. The Daily Beast reported in May that it had obtained audio of a meeting that Mr. Wohl and Mr. Berkman held with a Republican source in which they tried to pressure the, quote, victim into making the false allegation. Mr. Berkman wrote on Twitter in May that the man had approached them with the story, which we believed and continue to believe is true. No, it's not, and I don't think that they actually continue to believe that it's true either. Where's the story of Jacob Wall and his ban for life? What was that exactly? Because they didn't discuss that in here. Jacob Wall, the teen hedge fund manager, here we are, from finance.yahoo.com, from Yahoo Finance News, from March of 2017. Jacob Wall, the teenage hedge fund manager, has been ordered to cease and desist. And let's see, editors note the story has been updated. When? I don't know. To reflect that Jacob Wall and now defunct NEX Capital, NEX Capital, were banned by the National Futures Association, and to clarify the status of an administrative action brought by the Arizona Securities Commission. Jacob Wall, the 19-year-old Wall of Wall Street, as he liked to call himself, I guess, hedge fund manager, faces a pending action by the Arizona Securities Commission that accuses Wall's company of violating the state's securities laws. The commission cites a number of instances of alleged fraudulent activities by Wall and his companies Wall Capital Investment Group, Nex Capital Management LLC, and Montgomery Assets Incorporated. In the September 27, 2016 order, a hearing is scheduled for August 7, 2017 at the regulatory agency's Phoenix office. Blah, 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 lots of stuff, contents of the order. Among the 14 alleged counts of fraud in connection with the offer or sale of securities included in the case and cease and desist order, are the following. Wall and Wall Capital Investment Group, WCIG, falsely represented to Investor 1 that only 20% of his investment would be at risk, yet lost approximately 50% of his Investor 1's securities account value between December of 2015 and January of 2016, according to the Securities Commission. So there, talking about December of 2015. Well, let's put it at 2016. I mean, he's 18 years old again. Wall and WCIG falsely represented to Investor 1 that WCIG managed between $9 million and $10 million in assets, but actually managed less than $500,000, the order said, and that was probably his dad's money. Wall and WCIG misled Investor 1 regarding the risk associated with the investment by representing that a textbook trade for WCIG had a 99.5% probability of profit, according to the commission. Wall, Johnson, and MAI falsely represented to potential investors that MAI had 35 years of experience flipping single-family residential real estate, but MAI had existed for less than 6 months, the order said. Despite the recent indictments resulting from criminal investigations into bribery and corruption by members of the Arizona Corporation Commission, we fully expect a full and fair hearing, Wall's statement concluded. How about that? He's just been brought up on charges by the Arizona Corporation Commission, and he says, well, despite the fact that they're corrupt and should be in jail, we expect to be cleared. Well, he wasn't cleared, and he was banned for life from futures trading. Huh. How interesting is that? Okay. Well, that's what's the futures situation though? There's I don't see any. All right, maybe the security he was selling was futures in the returns of his real estate flipping business, which he also didn't have. All right, very interesting. So now he's been charged with felony in California on top of all this. So it's quite an ambitious program he has. Before the age of 22, he'll have been brought up on 2 different securities-related fraud cases. And P.S., you should totally attend his press events announcing shocking and incredible allegations against presidential candidates and the special counsel. I really don't know. I mean, talk about the chutzpah factor in the Republican squad. I mean, Trump is one thing, but he's at least got decades of experience defrauding people behind him. This Wall guy is 21 years old and is just running around like a major player here. And I don't know, people were believing it. He's famous. He's got a Wikipedia entry and everything. There's articles being written about him. Again, no clue as to where this comes from, and no reason for the rest of us to get out of bed. You can just reinvent yourself tomorrow, as long as you're not embarrassed or not worried about being arrested or brought up on federal charges, and say you're a big deal. And I guess people will believe it. It's pretty incredible. Okay, news update on the strange explosion off the northern coast of Russia and the everlasting gobstopper of a cruise missile that was thought to be behind it. This, a piece from CNBC, U.S. intel report says mysterious Russian explosion was triggered by recovery mission of nuclear-powered missile, not a test. So, a somewhat important distinction, and I guess something we missed in the hurricane mess, because this was published last Thursday, August 29th, right about the time when Donald Trump stopped listening to any new updates about the hurricane. Amanda Macias, I'm supposing is her last name here, writing for CNBC. Quickly, I guess the gist of the story, shall we read through the whole thing, is that it wasn't that, it doesn't mean that one of these nuclear-powered cruise missiles that we've dubbed on the NATO side Skyfall wasn't involved. Rather, it was not a screw-up of a test flight of the missile that created the explosion, but the recovery efforts from a previously failed test effort on one of these missiles. I don't know if that, changes our perception of what's going on, but it's interesting to keep up with the developing thoughts about this thing. A U.S. intelligence assessment found that the mysterious explosion off of Russia's northern coast occurred during a recovery mission to salvage a nuclear-powered missile from the ocean floor, according to people with direct knowledge of the report. And I guess that explains the presence of the various ships that were spotted by satellite observers in the area. It was apparently a little bit off. The explanation of having these ships that specialized in the recovery of nuclear materials made a certain amount of sense, in that they were, of course, involved now in the job of recovering leaked nuclear materials. But I guess there was some question about why such a ship would have been brought there for a missile test, unless they, I guess, out of an abundance of caution, they were worried about a possible accident. I mean, that's, I think, a responsible thing to do. It might be how NATO or American forces would handle such a launch. On the off chance that there's an accident, we want the recovery crews here. But I don't think it's necessarily characteristic of the way Russia handles these things, but maybe I'm just guessing. Anyway, apparently there was some question, and now this helps answer it. The mysterious explosion, the article continues, on August 8th, killed 5 scientists and sparked fears that Russia had tested its new nuclear-powered Burevestnik missile, also known as Skyfall, easier to say. This was not a new launch of the weapon. Instead, it was a recovery mission to salvage a lost missile from a previous test, said a person with direct knowledge of the U.S. intelligence assessment. There was an explosion on one of the vessels involved in the recovery, and that caused a reaction in the missile's nuclear core, which led to the radiation leak, said another person who spoke to CNBC on the condition of anonymity. So they had tested one of these rather dangerous sounding missiles before. It had failed, fallen into the ocean, and sunk to the bottom. And nothing happened. But, it's not wise to leave that lying on the bottom of the ocean, I would think. So they decided, well, we'll send one of these ships, 3 of these ships, I think, but one of these will be tasked with hauling this thing up and containing it. I mean, you don't want mini nuclear reactor cores just lying on the bottom of the ocean if you can help it. And I guess what nobody expected was, what if we bring this thing up and put it into one of these ships that's supposed to be safe for handling nuclear materials, and something on the ship blows up. Not the missile necessarily that everybody's worried about the missile. Well, the missile isn't going to blow up. What if your kitchen blows up and it blows up a nuclear-powered missile along with it? Well, then that'll scatter radioactive materials all over the place. But why would the kitchen blow up? I don't know. But I'll tell you what's better is there's a 0% chance of the kitchen propane tank exploding if you just leave the damn thing where it is. I mean, I guess what's the worry? A shark is going to bite it and explode the core? I don't know. But again, you don't want nuclear materials lying on the ground. And also, of course, these are expensive things, right? It's an extraordinarily expensive program, apparently. So maybe they thought they could recover the reactor and load it up on another missile. They wouldn't have to build another one. I don't know what drove the decision. And it doesn't sound like a bad decision. Should we leave the nuclear reactor on the floor of the ocean or get it? You know what? Get it. But I guess they weren't expecting this. Oh, well. U.S. intelligence did not mention potential health or environmental risks posed by damage to the missile's nuclear reactor. CNBC learned last year of Moscow's similar preparations to try to recover a nuclear-powered missile lost at sea. Same one? Different one? I don't know. Crews attempted to recover a missile that landed in the Barents Sea after a failed test. The operation included 3 vessels, one of which was equipped to handle radioactive material from the weapon's nuclear core. Just not very well, I guess. If the Russians were able to regain possession of the missile, U.S. intelligence analysts expected that Moscow will use the procedure as a blueprint for future recovery operations. I guess not now. Now it's just what not to do. Last March, Russian President Vladimir Putin unveiled a slew of hypersonic weapons, as well as Burevestnik, or however it's pronounced, saying it was a nuclear-powered missile with unlimited range. However, the Kremlin has yet to perform a successful test of the weapon over multiple attempts, according to sources with direct knowledge of a U.S. intelligence report on the weapons program. It was tested once earlier this year, and prior to that, the weapon was tested 4 times between November 2017 and February of 2018, each resulting in a crash. So it doesn't sound like it's going too well, and maybe next time it would even be better to let the thing stay on the bottom of the ocean. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. That 1-minute break is just sometimes just too short. Okay, let's see. I think we're done with that story. I don't know that there's much more to uncover about that one, but just wanted to keep up to date on that. Seemed like a Friday sort of story to talk about. Let's see. Here's a good one. Good by Friday standards. That doesn't sound good either. Apologies in advance to Jeff Hauser and David Siegel, who, pardon me, write this piece for the American Prospect. It's a good piece and a good warning and a good thing to bring up on Friday. And that's all I really should have said about this. Can Democrats stop McConnell and Trump's quiet regulatory takeover? We knew that's been happening in the background. And this is, in fact, not even a brand new article. It's a June 2019 article. But it got brought. I think probably I saw Jeff Hauser retweeting this thing, re-upping the article, if you will, because everybody is focused pretty seriously and quite correctly on McConnell's efforts on behalf of sort of packing the judiciary with Trump, with Republican appointees, lifetime appointees. And we've all been rightly focused on that. But there's another more subtle embedding going on that I think we've all known was happening. But Jeff and David here are going to focus our attention on it. And I'm glad that they brought this thing back up on that because I missed it the first time. Unless it's in pocket from June. That's entirely possible. But I don't think so. I think I made the big mistake here and missed it the first time. Can Democrats stop McConnell and Trump's quiet regulatory takeover? There's a subheader here that reads, Republicans have stymied the filling of Democratic seats in independent agencies. There doesn't appear to be any plan to confront this. And that's so often the case. An increasing number of progressives are frightened by how effectively Mitch McConnell has packed federal courts. True. In President Obama's final 2 years, McConnell, as you know, blocked the nomination of Judge Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court and abused the Senate's blue slip procedure, limiting Obama's mark on the federal judiciary. And by the way, the fact that Obama left a mark on the federal judiciary at all is thanks to getting rid of the filibuster on lower court judges, and you're welcome for that. All right. With Donald Trump in office, McConnell went nuclear to ensure the installation of right-wing ideologues Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, did a 180 on blue slips by ignoring their deployment by Democrats, important to remember, and reduced debate time for lower court judges to just 2 hours. All of this has given Trump more impact on the courts in 2 years than Obama had in his first 4. But the judiciary is not the only terrain upon which Trump and McConnell have deployed metaphorical nuclear arms. Beneath the radar, they are also trampling norms to reduce the influence of Democratic appointees at critical independent agencies, which protect consumers, workers, and the broader economy. And while Democrats are waking up to the consequences of Republican court packing, they have required prodding to even notice this other right-wing takeover. Until Democrats recognize these hardball tactics from Trump and McConnell, they are unlikely to develop a legal or political plan to confront them. And we are going to need this, because a lot of these people are going to be protected from summary dismissal, even if we were to win a trifecta over in the 2020 elections. Well, they're protected if, laws apply. But maybe they don't. Who knows? We'll find out. Okay. Another article happening here via Twitter, so I'll just open that up and come back to that later. Okay, so unlikely to develop, this is the important part, a legal or political plan to confront these hardball tactics. Powerful 5-member independent agencies, or however many members they may have, such as the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. We keep mentioning the Federal Election Commission, which is effectively shut down because of this sort of hardball tactics, or constitutional hardball tactics. But we haven't been discussing these others. So the FDIC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Federal Communications Commission typically include statutory rules like this from the law that created the SEC, saying not more than 3 of such commissioners, of a group of 5, shall be members of the same political party. Okay, so that's an attempt at statutorily requiring that the boards of directors of these independent agencies are, well, I guess the term we settle on is bipartisan. So no more than 3 out of the 5 can be Republican or Democrat, whichever one is, in the majority. So you can have 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats, 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. You can have 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and an independent. You can have, I guess you could have 5 independents, because they wouldn't be members of the same political party. But you know how things actually go here, and that's not how it's going to come out. But that's a statutory requirement. Now, for decades, each party has acted upon a shared agreement to interpret that language to allow the Senate leadership of the party that is not the president's, e.g., as it says here, Harry Reid under George W. Bush, or McConnell under Obama, or Chuck Schumer under Trump, right? So, for decades, the understanding has been that the Senate leadership of the party that is not the president's chooses the minority commissioners. For example, FCC Chairman Ajit Pai, who led the effort to roll back Obama priorities, such as his signature net neutrality rule, is nominally an Obama appointee, even as all close observers know he was really chosen by Mitch McConnell. So the party that is not the president's, under Obama, therefore Republicans, even though they are the majority in the Senate at the time, they nominate the minority members to this, in this case, the FCC. So, as with so many better-known Washington practices of this era, McConnell and Trump are undermining the norm of allowing the opposition party to work its will on minority nominees for independent agencies, right? It would now fall to Chuck Schumer and the Senate Democrats to name the names of Democrats to represent the minority on these independent commissions, where there are 5 members. 2 could be nominated by, well, have their names put forward by the opposite party in the Senate. Democrats in the Senate would be allowed these 2, and by tradition, the president says, fine, I'll take who you give me, and the Senate approves them. But apparently this is not going on anymore. Rarely are these agencies viewed in the aggregate, making it difficult to appreciate the scale of the administration's obstruction. You just find out that there are 2 commissioners missing from this one commissioner missing from that one, etc. Using the Revolving Door Project's Independent Federal Agency Monitor, and there's a link here to that, it is possible to view the problem holistically. Of the 148 positions across 30 agencies requiring political balance, okay, that is to say, across the 30 independent agencies that have this political balance requirement, there are 148 positions open, and there are 148 positions in total. 70 are presently either vacant or expired. So that's half. While those seats are nearly evenly distributed, 36 Republican seats, 34 Democratic seats, there are only 9 pending nominations for Democratic seats versus 18 for Republican ones. In fact, the lone vacancies on several boards with inordinate impact on the economy, like the FDIC, the SEC, and the National Labor Relations Board, are Democratic. That does not seem like an accident. Rather, these persistent vacancies likely represent a coordinated assault by advocates of corporate power against the regulatory state. An administration that respected norms could have easily avoided these vacancies. For instance, Trump and McConnell could have paired the renomination of Democratic NLRB Commissioner Mark Pierce with Republican John Ring. Instead, Ring was confirmed while Pierce wasn't renominated until the day after his term expired and he had to vacate his seat. Eventually, Pierce and I'm saying it Pierce, I don't know how he says Pierce or Pierce, P-E-A-R-C-E. Eventually, though, he withdrew from consideration. Similar stories have unfolded at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the United States Postal Service. While each of these imbalances is potentially harmful on its own, when viewed together, the implication for regulations and the public interest are disastrous. Elite corporate lawyers have taken gleeful note of how the SEC's 3-to-1 Republican advantage benefits those who violate securities laws. The SunTrust BB&T mega bank merger, the largest since the financial crash, appears set to achieve unwarrantedly easy FDIC approval. A key reason for its swift passage, one Democrat recommended for an FDIC seat, Graham Steele, has been stuck on Trump's desk, miraculously, since last year. And if you look, he loves to keep that desk clear, so it's not even on Trump's desk. Another Democrat, Martin Gruenberg, is serving lawfully, but is de facto fireable at will, antithetical to the intended structure of independent agencies, since his spot on the board technically expired in December of 2018. That's a under-discussed aspect of this situation, right? You get appointed to the board, your term expires, you can continue to serve so that the board can continue to function, at least for a while, but it leaves you as a fireable at-will member of the board, which, one, leaves you on the bubble, and 2, removes the independence of the agencies. Allison Lee, a Democratic nominee for the SEC, waited 9 months after Schumer recommended her to formally get that nomination. She had a hearing earlier this week, that would have been back in June though, in the Senate Banking Committee, but it's unclear when she'll reach the Senate floor for a vote. I don't know whether she has since then or not. this is the second level of delay. After Trump slow walks the nomination, McConnell slow walks the confirmation. So there's no incentive, in other words, for them to hurry up and get those seats filled, because as long as they're not filled, there's a 3-1 Republican advantage on some of these boards. And by the way, even where there's 3-1, or even if it's, I don't know, it doesn't matter what the numbers are. But if you're serving in an expired term and you're fireable at will, I wanted to add to this. It's one thing that you're there, right? They can't just fire you. I guess they could just fire you for no reason, but they haven't so far been interested in doing so. But that's probably because, if you're in that position, right, and you're the one in a 3-1 divided board, and a controversial issue comes up, and what do you do? Even if you're not particularly interested in maintaining your seat on the board because it's your income, like presumably a lot of these people have alternative sources of income more or less readily available to them. They move from the FCC. You can probably move into a corporate law firm pretty quickly from there. But they're probably thinking to themselves, I'm a good Democrat. That's how I got here. Some people would criticize that, all by itself and say, you really won't want to be beholden to the Democratic Party. But okay, you're a Democratic operative. You're a big-time Democratic donor, whatever it is that brought you to the attention of the powers that be, such that you end up on one of these boards. And you're outnumbered 3-1, and you're probably sitting there saying, yeah, I can cast my vote against this thing, and it'll be, futile. I'll be outvoted 3-1. Should I raise a stink about the fact that I am on a 3-1 board? Well, not really, because even if the board was full, I suppose it would still be 3-2, and we'd be outvoted all the time there too. But if you bring this situation up or make too much of a stink about a particular case that's before you, hanging over your head is, well, I could be fired from this job at any time since my term has expired. That would leave it a 3-0 board. They would be able to rubber stamp everything and move along. I don't know what kind of rules exist on these boards where one member of the minority can hold things up or slow things down long enough for them to, if they can possibly interest the press in what's going on. I'm sure that's a very difficult thing to do, but they might be able to make an impact and say, it's better to have one Democratic voice here than none. So is this the issue over which I'll raise a stink? Is this the hill I'll die on and finally force Trump to fire me from the board so that they can rubber stamp everything? It's probably best if I stay here as a watchdog, even if I don't bark at every single thing. I wonder if that's not happening across multiple agencies at any given time. Back to the story now. Allison Lee, a Democratic nominee for the SEC, right? Oh, I'm sorry, we read this one. This is the one who waited 9 months after Schumer recommended her, and still no word as of June anyway on when the confirmation would go forward. It is only a matter of time before creative plaintiffs seek a legal ground to challenge Trump's failure to, quote, take care to maintain the partisan balance mandated by the statutes creating these agencies. Remember, of course, he's sworn an oath to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. When at the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, Kavanaugh wrote an opinion in 2016 ruling that a single individual running the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau undermines the constitutionally significant protections offered when independent agencies have multiple directors representing divergent interests. While Kavanaugh's opinion is problematic in many ways, it was appropriate for him to quote esteemed and progressive senior D.C. Circuit Judge Harry Edwards, who wrote in 2003 that collegiality plays an important part in mitigating the role of partisan politics and personal ideology by allowing judges of differing perspectives and philosophies to communicate with, listen to, and ultimately influence one another in constructive and law-abiding ways. Independent agencies are constructed to embody the view that collegial decisions are preferable to narrowly partisan ones. So if you're working on a board with no Democrats on it, you're not afforded that opportunity. If you're working with a board with one fireable at will Democrat on the board, you're not likely to get the full breadth, the full scope of that Democrat's particular interests in the case in order to weigh all of the various factors and come to a consensus decision. This is sort of a convoluted thing here. Harry Edwards was writing about, panels of, appeals court judges, or I'm not entirely certain what he was talking about, but that was extrapolated by Kavanaugh in ruling that there was, something wrong, something unconstitutional about the structure of the CFPB in vesting its power in a single director rather than in a, say, for instance, a 5-member, ideologically balanced, for lack of a better term, board. As Trump's role in this mess seems to be intentional, remember, he has also praised the flexibility of avoiding the Constitution's appointment clauses for several cabinet secretaries. One wonders how an intentional subversion of the statutory prohibition on partisan dominance for these agencies undermines agency work product. For instance, courts are supposed to hold unlawful and set aside agency action findings and conclusions which result from actions, quote, not in accordance with law. Like, for instance, the law that says there should be a partisan balance and that there should be 5 members of these boards, as often as possible anyway. So could all of their actions and decisions be disregarded as not in accordance with the law if they are 3-0 Republican or 3-1, but the one Democrat is not only outnumbered, but fireable at will? Regardless of whether the courts eventually offer relief, Democrats need to be elevating Trump and McConnell's devious stealth nuclear option right now. And that was in June. And they haven't been, have they? In the short run, if Republicans blow up the norms surrounding these appointments, they should be forced to own the reputational consequences rather than quietly proceed. One upcoming opportunity is the hearing in the House Financial Services Committee that they'd announced to look into the proposed SunTrust BB&T merger being reviewed by the hobbled FDIC. I guess they didn't take much advantage of that. In the long run, Democrats running for president must decide whether or not to return to bipartisan norms of the past as if they have continued uninterrupted, blithely forgetting the current slow walking of minority agency appointments rather than applying consequences to Republicans for Trump and McConnell's partisan undermining of independent agencies would only encourage more such extreme actions by Republicans in the future. And where have we heard that kind of prediction before? Well, okay, this is a new application for it, and a point well taken. If it was sometimes a little bit meandering, but that was probably my own fault by interjecting all the time into the middle of the organized thoughts from Jeff and David here. All right, moving on to yet another subject. Mother Jones has an article much discussed, and I know that I saw this morning David Farenthold enjoying the fact that I guess another House committee, investigative committee, has decided they want to look into this as well. I think I saw him say something like, oh, they're going to be investigating my favorite mystery loan from Trump. Mother Jones' story seems to have prompted this one. Russ Choma, C-H-O-M-A. I don't know whether he says coma. Probably not. I'd avoid it if I could. This story from a day or two ago. Donald Trump has never explained a mysterious $50 million loan. Is it evidence of tax fraud? Lots of Fox News question marks involved in this one. Well, one anyway, and that's lots as far as I'm concerned. A Mother Jones investigation has uncovered new information about a puzzling Trump deal. All right, what's the deal with this deal? Let's find out. Donald Trump's massive debts. That's how it starts here, and in bold it says this. He owes hundreds of millions of dollars, are the subject of continuous congressional and journalistic scrutiny. But for years, one Trump loan has been particularly mystifying. a debt of more than $50 million that Trump claims he owes to one of his own companies. According to tax and financial experts, the loan, which Trump has never fully explained, might be part of a controversial tax avoidance scheme known as debt parking. Yet a Mother Jones investigation has uncovered information that raises questions about the very existence of this loan, presenting the possibility that this debt was concocted as a ploy to evade income taxes, a move that could constitute tax fraud. Here's what is publicly known about this mystery debt. On the personal financial disclosure forms that Trump must file each year as president, he divulged that he owes, quote, over $50 million to a company called Chicago Unit Acquisition, LLC. Gives you a hint of what he's talking about. And I guess he was buying up empty units in his buildings in Chicago, is my guess from the name. But okay, Chicago Unit Acquisition, LLC. The forms note that this entity is fully owned by Trump. In other words, Trump owes a large chunk of money to a company he controls. The disclosures state that this loan is connected to Trump's hotel and tower in Chicago, and the forms reveal puzzling details about Chicago Unit Acquisition. It earns no revenue, suggesting that Trump was not paying interest or principal on the loan, and Trump assigns virtually no value to Chicago Unit Acquisition. Something doesn't add up, right? I mean, they're owed $50 million. How could they have no value? And they have no revenue, which means he's not paying any interest. They just had money, now they don't, and so they're valueless and making no money, which says something's wrong here. Under basic accounting principles, a firm that is owed money and has no outstanding debt should be worth at least as much as it is owed. The loan has another odd feature. It is identified as a springing loan. I don't know if I know what that is. It's explained here, a type of loan made to borrowers who are viewed as credit risks. How do you like that? So his own company, Chicago Unit Acquisition, is it LLC? Yep, it is. Okay, so Chicago Unit Acquisition LLC is owned by Trump. It lends money to Trump personally under terms ordinarily used when the borrower is a credit risk. So he is calling himself a credit risk. That is pretty amazing. Known sometimes as bad boy loans, interesting, these agreements allow the lender, Chicago Unit Acquisition, allow the lender to impose harsh repayment terms if certain criteria aren't met. These are not the type of loan terms that someone is likely to impose on himself. Yes, good point. The Trump Organization has consistently refused to answer questions about Chicago Unit Acquisition, a limited liability company it formed in Delaware, because Chicago, right? In 2005, as construction began on the Trump International Hotel and Tower in downtown Chicago. But Trump did tell the New York Times in a 2016 interview that this debt represents a loan he repurchased from a group of lenders. We don't assess any value to it because we don't care, Trump said. I have the mortgage. That is all there is. Very simple. I am the bank. Let me see if I can figure this out here. So it's a loan he repurchased from a group of lenders. So a group of lenders who loaned what? Money to who? And he repurchased. Okay, well, that's his explanation for it. I have the mortgage. That's all there is. Very simple. I am the bank. Jason Greenblatt, who was then the Trump Organization's top lawyer, declined to explain to the Times the reason for the Chicago Unit Acquisition deal. It's really personal corporate trade secrets, if you will, he said. Neither newsworthy or, frankly, anybody's business. Uh-oh, that's a bad sign for him. Trump has not publicly identified the creditors from whom he bought this loan. And, I mean, are we saying that there was a loan made to Chicago Unit Acquisition and Trump bought the loan? that can't really be it either, right? Okay. Well, let's see. We'll see if we can straighten this out during the break. But a 2008 lawsuit Trump filed in connection with the Chicago project, a case that produced voluminous records detailing the financing of this venture, suggests two possibilities. The majority of the hotel and tower project was bankrolled by Trump's lender of choice, Deutsche Bank. That's a bad sign, which gave him $640 million loan. We're going to break it off here. I'll consider it over the break, and we'll pick it up when we come back from this on the other side. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think it looks to me like some of this gets unraveled in the next paragraph. We'll see if we can't figure this out. So where were we? Left off with the vague explanation from Trump that says he holds the mortgage on this and it's all there is, and I am the bank, and that's why he doesn't care to see this loan paid back. So where were we with this? Trump has not publicly identified the creditors from whom he bought this loan. But a 2008 lawsuit Trump filed in connection with the Chicago project suggests two possibilities. The majority of the hotel and tower project was bankrolled by Deutsche Bank, as they say, Trump's lender of choice, Deutsche Bank, in trouble now, which gave him $640 million on this project. Fortress Investment Group, a New York City-based hedge fund, provided Trump an additional $130 million in financing. I guess it would probably pay to look into who is Fortress Investment Group, but presumably Mother Jones did that and either found it of less interest or just whatever. Or maybe they discuss it later on. I don't know. Two other firms, Cerberus Capital Management and Dune Capital Management, partnered with Fortress on this loan. So I'm not clear on whether they provided additional money or the $130 million provided under the auspices of Fortress included contributions from Cerberus and Dune. But basically, what do we got here? Deutsche Bank, $640 million. Fortress Investment, $130 million. That makes $770 million in loaned financing for the Chicago project. According to court records, these were the only loans associated with the construction and development of Trump International Hotel and Tower in Chicago. Trump's Chicago project quickly became a financial debacle, hence the lawsuit. In 2008, the financial crisis struck as the project neared completion, and Trump, saddled with nearly $800 million in debt, was in jeopardy of defaulting on a $330 million payment he owed to Deutsche Bank in November of that year. So he owed Deutsche Bank $330 million on a $640 million loan. Wow. I mean, that's pretty quick. So what, in 2005... No, that was the date of the formation of Chicago Unit Acquisition. I don't know if that's when the project itself kicked off, but 640 loaned, and 330 of it, that's a little more than half of it, was due in 2008 in November, and he was in jeopardy of defaulting on that to Deutsche Bank. To fend off his biggest creditor, Deutsche Bank, Trump attempted a brazen legal gambit. He sued Deutsche Bank. That's interesting. I forgot about that. I mean, we did know that. And I remember this case, or I remember this being mentioned anyway. And I wonder whether that has any bearing at all on Deutsche Bank's sudden willingness to hand over all the paperwork it has on him. But okay, to fend them off, he sued Deutsche Bank, accusing the firm of causing the housing crisis and the economic meltdown that was supposedly inhibiting his ability to sell units in the Chicago project and repay his debts. That is a novel theory. So he owes him $330 million. He can't pay because there's a financial crisis and a housing crash, and he's got a tower full of condominiums that no one's buying. So he sues Deutsche Bank and says, you caused or had a part in causing this housing crisis and the financial crisis and the housing market depression. It's your fault. That's why I can't sell units, and so therefore I don't have to pay you. Wow. Okay, that is pretty brazen, I must say. Eventually, Trump settled his financial differences with Deutsche by repaying some of the money he owed the bank and refinancing the rest through the bank's private banking arm, according to records filed with the Cook County Recorder of Deeds. That is, Trump took out a new loan through Deutsche's private bank to cover his debt to the firm's commercial lending side. Deutsche Bank deserves to collapse for this, of course. I mean, can you imagine, by the way, doing this as part of your settlement for having accused them of exacerbating the financial crisis and causing the markets to crash? I mean, maybe he's got a point here. I mean, if Deutsche Bank is willing to lend to the same person from their private banking side to pay off a loan to their own commercial banking side, he might be right. They might be overly, responsible in larger part than others for the financial crisis. What a strange, that isn't going to do it. This, $330 million isn't going to crash anything, but just as a general practice, how many more people are they doing this for? This transaction apparently did not involve purchasing any debt, suggesting that the debt Trump claims to have bought could not have been from the Deutsche Bank loan. Got it? That leaves the Fortress debt, right? They were the ones who loaned him $130 million on this project. So, in March of 2012, as Trump resolved his dispute with Deutsche Bank, he finalized a separate deal with Fortress and its partners to clear his debt with them. According to a source with direct knowledge of the deal, who spoke to Mother Jones, Fortress ultimately agreed to accept 50 cents on the dollar, or about $48 million for the outstanding debt, which by that time amounted to just under $100 million. He had made some payments on it. This was a steep loss for the hedge fund and its partners. The question is whether the deal was what's known as a discounted payoff, in which the debt was considered repaid and the loan was canceled by the lender, or whether Trump purchased what remained of the loan. That distinction has enormous implications. So I guess if he purchased it on for 50 cents on the dollar, right? So they had $100 million outstanding in debt from Trump, and somehow it gets settled for $48 million. So the question is, did they transfer $50 million to, well, how would they even structure this? Did they, in other words, okay, so did they knock half off the loan, or they reduce the principal and say you still owe us $50 million? Or does he say, I guess his claim here is, I'll give you $50 million when I owe you 100, and you give me the note on the loan. You get $50 million cash. I buy a $50 million debt to you, from you. So now I owe myself the $50 million. I could see that could be what he's talking about. That seems to fit the pattern. So, when a lender forgives a portion of a loan, this is why it makes a difference. The IRS considers the unpaid portion taxable income. In other words, Trump owes Fortress $100 million. If they say, you know what, forget it, you only owe us $50 million. That is $50 million income to Trump. Right? Okay? So as they explain right here. If a lender accepts $50 million in repayment of a $100 million debt, the borrower, in the eyes of the federal tax authorities, has earned $50 million and owes tax on that. The tax could be as high as 39%. But big-time borrowers have, and that's certainly Trump, have devised a tactic to forestall paying taxes in cases in which they're able to buy back their debt at a discount. So here's the trick you use. You don't want to owe taxes on $50 million after you've given away $50 million in cash. So here's what you do. They purchase the debt through a corporation, like, Chicago Unit Acquisition or something like that. You purchase the debt through a corporation, parking the loan with this entity to temporarily avoid realizing income. Debt parking falls into a legal gray area. Maybe there are respectable ways that it could work, but I would call it kind of a scam to pretend you haven't gotten rid of the debt, says Daniel Shaviro, a professional tax lawyer. I was going to say, it's like a professor of professional tax law? No. Professional tax lawyer? No. A professor of tax law. There it is. At New York University. So again, the deal here is, if I buy my debt of $100 million, if I buy the note from you for $50 million in cash, that makes me the lender to myself, and that's helpful because I don't have to pay myself back necessarily. But it does mean that I made $50 million in income in the IRS's eyes and may owe 39% of that $50 million in taxes. I can't have that because I've just given away all my money, $50 million in cash. So the scheme is, I will form an LLC and I will say, I'll capitalize it with the $50 million in cash that I have. And then the LLC will buy the debt from Fortress. And the LLC, I guess, could conceivably owe taxes, but not really, because the LLC never had a debt to Fortress. All they've done is purchased the note. So they're not going to owe any taxes either. Trump controls the LLC, so the pressure to pay back the $100 million to Fortress is off because the new owner of the note is Chicago Unit Acquisition, which he owns, but he doesn't owe the $50 million in taxes at all because he hasn't reached an agreement for debt forgiveness with Fortress. There's no debt forgiveness deal at all. There's just a bad deal as between Chicago Unit Acquisition and Fortress. Fortress agrees to sell this alleged third party a $100 million debt for $50 million in cash and leave it at that. How interesting. So I can see why that would be an illegal gray area. Debt parking can be permissible as long as the borrower intends to repay the loan. Parking debt indefinitely with no intention to repay it, however, violates federal tax law, according to tax experts. But then the question becomes, can we prove that Trump has no intention to ever pay the loan? Of course, having statements on the record like, I didn't pay it because I hold the note and I don't care, is bad for him in court. For that reason, here it says right here, Trump's comment to the Times that we don't care about the loan raised a red flag for several tax experts consulted by Mother Jones. They wondered whether this was an admission, of course it is, that he has no intention of repaying the loan. An implication reinforced by Trump's disclosures showing Chicago Unit Acquisition generates no revenue and has practically no value. If it expected to be paid back, then the value would be $50 million. If it expects not to be paid back, then it has no value. And debt parking that essentially places a loan into suspended animation indefinitely would not be considered legal, according to these tax experts. But the story of Trump's mystery loan gets even more complicated. Damn, we just figured this out, too. According to two sources with direct knowledge of the disposition of the Fortress loan, Fortress did not sell Trump this loan. Instead, according to these sources, Fortress canceled the debt after Trump paid about half of it. The transaction that Donald Trump did with the lender was a discounted payoff and not a purchase of the loan. I know that for sure, a person involved with the deal tells Mother Jones. That means there may have been no loan to buy, no debt to park. Trump might have invented a loan and then parked it. Wow. Fortress declined to comment on the Trump loan. Representatives of Cerberus Capital Management and Dune Real Estate Partners, which took over the business once run by Dune Capital Management, oh, that's a new thing, Dune Real Estate Partners, did not respond to requests for comment. To recap, Trump claims he bought a debt related to his Chicago venture, but neither of the two loans associated with this property appear to have been purchased. The Deutsche Bank loan was refinanced. The Fortress debt, according to sources with knowledge of the transaction, was canceled. That's a straight-up $50 million tax liability or $50 million of taxable income to Trump. He just didn't report it that way. And this raises a question. Did Trump create a bogus loan to evade a whopping tax bill on about $48 million in income? Got it. Several legal and real estate finance experts say it's possible to fabricate a loan. Doing so would be as easy as creating some paperwork and declaring the debt on your tax returns, though such a scheme would also violate federal tax law. When you see it, if you lay this all out, it's pretty brazen, says Adam Levitin, a law professor specializing in commercial real estate finance at Georgetown University. If you didn't actually buy the loan, this is just garden variety fraud. Yes, right. Most loans are documented in public records, but Mother Jones could locate no documentation of a loan owned by Chicago Unit Acquisition. The Cook County Recorder of Deeds, almost certainly a Democrat, by the way, has records concerning the original Deutsche Bank loan for the Chicago project, the Deutsche Bank loan that replaced it, and the Fortress loan. But the Recorder of Deeds has no filings related to Chicago Unit Acquisition. Not all loans are tied to property and require registration with local authorities. In those cases, here's a loophole coming, a filing called a Uniform Commercial Code Financing Statement is typically made. This is a publicly available legal form in which a creditor states its interest in the event of a loan default. The $130 million of the Fortress loan had a UCC statement filed in Delaware in 2005. Fortress filed a notice that this loan agreement was terminated, it does not specify how, on March 2012. In March of 2012. A search of records in New York, where the Trump Organization is based, Illinois, where the hotel is located, and Delaware, where Chicago Unit Acquisition is registered, found no UCC records related to Chicago Unit Acquisition. Levitin and Stephen Schwartz, a law and business professor at Duke University, say it's not totally unheard of for a company to skip filing a UCC statement in cases where one branch of a firm is loaning money to another. But Levitin says that submitting a UCC statement is standard practice in most scenarios where there is a large amount of collateral at stake. Could the Chicago Unit Acquisition loan be legitimate? The tax and real estate experts interviewed by Mother Jones had a difficult time explaining what this transaction could be. And the Trump Organization offered no explanations of its own. The company did not respond to a detailed list of questions from Mother Jones regarding Chicago Unit Acquisition and this loan, nor did the White House. Trump has a track record of pushing the envelope when it comes to paying or not paying taxes. In a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation examining the origins of the president's fortune, the New York Times reported in 2018 that, quote, President Trump participated in dubious tax schemes during the 1990s, including instances of outright fraud that greatly increased the fortune he received from his parents. Breaking with a 4-decade precedent for presidents, Trump has refused to release his tax returns, which would shed light on the tax strategies he has employed over the years. But the release of Trump's returns alone would probably not solve the Chicago Unit Acquisition mystery, nor would a standard IRS audit. It would take a forensic audit, says Martin Lobel, a prominent tax lawyer based in Washington, D.C. It is very labor-intensive, and it takes someone who has years of experience to spot the problem areas. This type of audit would entail combing methodically through every shred of paperwork underpinning Trump's financial claims. And Lobel and other tax experts Mother Jones interviewed are dubious that the IRS would mount this type of audit on a sitting president. Or really on anybody. The IRS, I would say, but the IRS is not going to look too closely at Trump's tax returns, Lobel said. But yet, by the way, he hasn't released them because they're under this intensive audit that's gone on for 3 years or more. It was going on even before he was president, right? But congressional Democrats, if they have their way, intend to do just that. Although, that's questionable too. In May, the House Ways and Means Committee subpoenaed the IRS to hand over 6 years of Trump's tax returns as part of an investigation into the agency's presidential audit program. By law, the IRS must annually audit the returns of a serving president and vice president. Yes, serving. But, as the panel's chair, Richard Neal, wrote in a recent Washington Post op-ed, it's not clear how much scrutiny these reviews entail. Neither Congress nor the public knows anything about the scope of those audits and whether the president can exert undue influence on the IRS to affect his or her tax treatment, Neal wrote. If, for example, the president is already under audit at the time he or she takes office, what happens to that audit? We don't know. And remember, that's the claim that Trump was making. My committee will consider legislation regarding the mandatory audit program to ensure these audits are conducted fairly and without undue influence from the commander-in-chief. And as part of our deliberations, we must review his tax information to better understand the audit program and propose any needed changes. I guess this is the rationale that Neal has constructed for himself for looking at it. He, in order to head off the objection, whether it's genuine or not, that Republicans will make that there's no legislative reason why the House Ways and Means Committee should get Trump's tax returns. His answer is, well, we want to see whether there's any legislative fixes necessary to the mandatory audit program that looks at the taxes of the president and the vice president. We want to know, will this detect problems that are, let's say, relevant to the national security? That's the reason he's giving, as opposed to simply leaning on the law that, again, now infamous 1924 law that simply says, you can have it for whatever. There's no legislative reason needed at all. The House Ways and Means Committee chairperson can simply ask for these things. I don't know. I think it probably makes more sense to people that there be some sort of legitimate interest behind it. But then the question of whether or not it needs to be strictly legislative is open to interpretation too. Representative Lloyd Doggett of Texas, a senior Democratic member of the House Ways and Means Committee, says the tax returns could reveal how Trump does business, including if he and his company have employed dubious tax strategies. Lying and tax avoidance appear to be a way of life for Trump, he notes. His tax returns could indicate the role tax dodging plays in Trump's overall business strategy. Perhaps this is another reason why Trump and his Republican enablers are so intent on defying the law to keep them hidden. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, who oversees the IRS, has so far rebuffed the Ways and Means Committee's efforts to obtain Trump's returns. In July, the panel sued the Treasury Department and the IRS to force them to comply. In a recent court filing, the committee revealed a tantalizing bit of information about this inquiry. A whistleblower had come forward with credible allegations of evidence of possible misconduct, specifically potential inappropriate efforts to influence the mandatory audit program. Wow, that would directly implicate Neal's stated reasons as well. Trump's finances are currently the subject of multiple inquiries in his home state of New York, following the New York Times investigation of his questionable tax schemes employed by Trump and his family. A spokesperson for the New York Department of Taxation and Finance said the agency was vigorously pursuing all appropriate avenues of investigation. New York Attorney General Letitia James has also been scrutinizing the financing of several Trump projects. This investigation was sparked by Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer and fixer, who told Congress earlier this year that Trump had inflated his assets on financial statements used to secure loans. In March, James subpoenaed record from Deutsche Bank concerning multiple Trump ventures, including the Trump Chicago project. Her office declined to comment on whether it had subpoenaed Fortress or planned to do so in the future, but James tells Mother Jones in a statement, "My office takes any allegations of significant tax fraud seriously. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States." Blanket statement, but or boilerplate, but welcome nonetheless. I guess that leaves open the question of whether any authorities in Chicago want to open investigations into any of this, or whether there are any other committees of the House that might have relevant questions as well. Okay. Well, very interesting. And I get the sense for why this is one of David Farenthold's favorites. I'll see if I can come up with that tweet later on and share that one with you. But I'm pretty sure that that's what he said, and I can see why. It's very interesting and weird and mysterious, but I think now, thanks to the article, we get a pretty good sense of what it was that made it so complicated and what it made it David Farenthold's favorite. It's actually, once you get through the explanation, an excellent one, I think, provided by Mother Jones there. Relatively easy to understand. Okay, well, we're almost at the end of the show here today, and gosh, there are still a million things that I wanted to bring to your attention. Maybe I'll throw one more in there quickly, just because of how it was promoted by Brian Beutler. And you can't let a week go by without telling people about what Brian Beutler is saying. In this case, the tweet, "This is one of the craziest and dumbest things I've ever seen." You got to have a look at that, right? He is retweeting the tweet of Bahman Kalbasi, and New York City and UN correspondent for the BBC Persian service. How do you like this? "Hard to overstate," he says, "how out of the ordinary this is for a high-ranking State Department official to attempt to bribe a ship captain. Then, when the guy didn't bite, they sanctioned him, kind of following their model in dealing with Iran Foreign Minister Zarif. Come see Trump or we will sanction you." What is this all about? It includes a screen grab from the Financial Times, which says this: 4 days before the U.S. imposed sanctions on an Iranian tanker suspected of shipping oil to Syria, the vessel's Indian captain received an unusual email from the top Iran official at the Department of State. "This is Brian Hook," it says. "I work for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo," which is a weird way of saying things, right? You just say what his title is. "I work for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and serve as the U.S. representative for Iran," Mr. Hook wrote to Akhilesh Kumar on August 26th, according to several emails seen by the Financial Times. "I am writing with good news," which is also a weird thing and sounds an awful lot like a Nigerian prince scam. The good news was that the Trump administration was offering Mr. Kumar several $1 million to pilot the ship, until recently known as the Grace 1, to a country that would impound the vessel on behalf of the U.S. That doesn't sound like something a ship's captain would be willing to do. To make sure Mr. Kumar did not mistake the email for a scam, which it was, it included an official State Department phone number. So that's the idea. Basically, they think this is shipping oil illegally from Iran to Syria, so they contact the ship's captain directly and say, "We'll give you several $1 million to surrender your ship to U.S. impoundment if you, instead of going to Syria, sell your ship here." That seems very weird, yes, and it is hard to overstate how out of the ordinary it is for a high-ranking State Department official or anyone else, quite honestly, to make an offer like this. And as Brian put it, it's one of the craziest and dumbest things I've ever seen. Brian Hook, as it turns out, is apparently in line for a bit of a promotion as well, as the Trump administration reshuffles the team, for lack of a better word, in charge of Middle East peace process. Apparently, Kushner decided, he didn't feel like doing it. And the new chief of day-to-day work, I guess Kushner still considers himself in charge of this thing, is his former assistant, who's apparently like also 12 years old and has no experience at anything whatsoever. But Brian Hook, as special representative for Iran, is apparently being offered a role in this office as well, which is sort of a weird integration of somebody with an Iran portfolio into an Israel-Palestine situation. But of course, since Israel has done everything it can to involve itself in the Iran situation, and vice versa, the U.S. involving Israel and invoking Israel in the Iran situation, some weird things likely to happen. And here he is bribing ship captains along the way, too. Very weird. Just something to keep an eye on over the weekend.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Justice Putnam up next with his program. On his menu today, weeks after Virginia Republicans abruptly ended a special legislative session on gun safety, the NRA cut their leader a huge check. There's lots going on, both in Virginia, around the country, and around the world. Only Justice Putnam puts them all together for you on his program coming up